I'm a native-born Australian and I live in the UK, and I'm also into Studebaker motor cars. And a lot of people would ask, how on earth does an Australian land in England and have a great interest in one make of American cars like Studebaker? Well, that started at a very young age for me. When I was a young boy, I think I was 4 years old, my father bought a 62 GT Hawk, which is very similar to this one here, and we had that as the family car for 5 or 6 years in Melbourne. And I remember washing it with my brother and coming home from Sydney one time with my mother and my brother. And Dad was driving, he had us at over 100 miles an hour, and Mum was screaming at him to slow down, and my brother and I were just going, "Yay, Dad!" So, Studebakers have always sort of been in the blood, and even when I was growing up, my dad's old wartime photo album, he joined up at 15 into the Navy and went off to World War II, and then he finished up with that and went off into Korea after that. And in his flying days, he had this wonderful photo album, and his father in Perth had bought a brand new Brooklands Riley back in 1929, and he raced it very successfully in Australia. So in this fantastic photograph album of wonderful aircraft taking off and landing on the deck was all these car pictures as well. So I had always enjoyed looking at old cars, and just up the road from me in Melbourne there was a car dealership called Lance Dixon that had sold Holdens, and in his dealership he had like a 1934 Grand Prix Alpha and a 1937 Cord plus a whole Bugatti Type 51. So when you're like 9 or 10 and you're looking at this stuff, it's like wonderful, wonderful cars. So I'd made up my mind that as soon as I got my first job, I'd buy a car. So when I did that when I was 19, I bought a Studebaker, of course. And it all stemmed from there. So I spent 3.5 years living in Canada, which was great fun. I met my wife there, so I was married to a Canadian. And by chance, we ended up living in England, and we brought one of our Studebakers with us, which is a 1937 Australian-built Dictator sedan, which was our wedding car back home in Australia, and it also brought our kids home from the hospital. So our two little English children had their first ride in a Studebaker. So I think you start to understand at this point in time that I'm really committed to the make of Studebaker, so much so that I'm actually the editor of the UK Car Club magazine. So if you want to look at that online, it's Studebaker Owners Club UK, you'll find it. Two of the Studebakers in my collection are GT Hawks. One is a 64 model, which the colour of is white, and the other one is this red 1963 Supercharged GT. White 64 GT is a great American cruiser. Not all Studebakers were built with the good options, but this one was. It's got power disc brakes, automatic transmission, air conditioning, laid-back bucket seats, everything you want to be a nice American cruiser. It's a great car, so on the highway it just cruises along at 60 or 70 miles an hour, it's low revving, it's easy going. Is a bit more special. It's a 1963 GT with an Avanti Supercharged on it, and they only built maybe 150 supercharged cars in '63 that were in the GT Hawk lineup or the Lark lineup. This one's a clone because the original ones are incredibly hard to come by and are well sought after. But because it's a clone, you can probably take a little bit more license with it. So this one's been modified a little bit more with electronic ignition, so an extra heavy-duty rear sway bar on it, so it holds it on the ground a bit more. And they've altered the supercharged or side-mounted blower, which is on an Avanti instead of a top-mounted job, and you can put a pressure box on it, which is from another 500 brake horsepower motor that Studebaker did called the R3, which was incredibly fast. So this one's a bit of a hybrid between an R2, which is normally supercharged, and an R3. And it's a complete animal on the road. And it sort of makes you want to smile from ear to ear. So as soon as you come out of the garage, it's a smiley face car, and all you want to do is put your foot down, drop it into low gear, and go. It's a lot more fun in terms of its performance nature. Always enjoyed the kooky things that Studebaker did, and right at the end they made a whole series of performance cars that absolutely got up and went. It's like when you hit 100 miles an hour, if you can drive that fast in a car like this, when you can do that, it just wants to keep going. They're quite amazing in terms of what they can do, and they're pretty much bulletproof engineering actually. On these, the motor is the same as what's been used since like the mid-50s.
Big cheesy grin.
Yeah, there are people in life that just are a single make person. I'm not quite a single make person. But it's the car that I always choose to be in. I have Packards as well, and they are wonderful cars. They actually would make, as far as I'm concerned, they would make a Studebaker seem like an attempt at making a car. But I would much rather be in a Studebaker. I think it's that childhood attachment I've had since I was 4 years old, and the fact that Dad had one, it all sort of comes into the mix. Anything that's common, I'm probably not there anymore. My tastes have shifted slightly from what they were when I was younger. But I do enjoy the Studebakers immensely.